Paul Metsa's Wall of Power TV is brought to you in part by Grey Wolf Lodge, your home away from home in the North Woods, and the Solar Arts Building in Northeast Minneapolis.
Hi, welcome to Wall of Power TV. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. We've got an interesting show tonight. Two great friends of mine, Gregg Inhofer, keyboard player, bass player, songwriter, and phenomenal singer, who have to be featured on Bob Dylan's record called Blood on the Tracks, and a great author, journalist named Rick Shefchik, Duluth East, class of 1970. Rick and I are co-writing a book that centers around discussions we've had with the Minneapolis musicians who played on Blood on the Tracks. We're going to do a little research on both sides of those sessions, which took place on 2 nights in December of 1974. And one of the things we're going to be doing is talking to those Minneapolis musicians, getting their before Blood on the Tracks story and after their Blood on the Tracks story.
I always say I'm not totally proud of my past, but I don't run from it.
Mm-hmm.
My mantra is all roads lead to now.
Right.
And I'm very happy. I couldn't see it any other way. You know, there was my wife was saying, well, you know, you used to be a little bitter about the Dylan thing. I said, I wasn't never bitter. I was pragmatic,
Mm-hmm.
as was Peter. He and I saw eye to eye.
Right. Well, you were talking about the bitterness, but you know, it reminds me of a song or a line from "You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go." Dylan says, "When something isn't right, it's wrong,"
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to be bitter about something to recognize that something wasn't right.
Yeah. We, perfectly honest, we got screwed.
Yeah. You did.
The 6 Minneapolis musicians got screwed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not claiming. I'm not claiming anything other than synchronicity, other than we were synchronistically brought together,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked. It worked so well that his album still keeps on regenerating itself over the years.
Currently ranked as the 9th best album ever recorded.
In the 70s, or no, the late 80s, early 90s sometime. I was never bitter. I felt we got screwed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sitting at my coffee table with a bunch of bills, a stack of bills that I can't pay. And I'm watching MTV back when MTV had music instead of 16 and Pregnant.
Right.
And they're doing the top 100 rock albums of all time. Number 25, Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks. And I'm listening to Tangled Up in Blue. I'm listening to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this stack of bills, and I said, this is the definition of irony. That's what it is. I get it now. Another time I had was when my stepson was playing Rock Band, and he opened up the secret song.
Mm-hmm.
Early one morning, the sun was shining. I was laying in bed. I'm going, holy shit. When we did the show in 2000 with, and Eric Weisberg came,
Mm-hmm.
I asked him, I said, Eric, there's a question I've been wanting to ask you for 20 years, 30 years. And I asked him if he got performance royalties. And he said he got performance royalties for 9 months. He got a gold record for Blood on the Tracks, and he got a gold single
Mm-hmm.
for Tangled Up in Blue. He didn't play on Tangled Up in Blue.
Right. You did.
We never got any of that.
Mm-hmm.
We never got performance royalties. I have thought many times over the last 10, 20 years that I should sue Sony because they bought Columbia and they buy any baggage. I should sue them. All I want is performance royalties that I should have gotten, well, plus interest since 1975.
Do you have any idea what that would come to now?
With the interest?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, let's forget about the interest. What was the performance royalties for 9 months?
I have no idea. I was naive.
Yeah.
I was 24, 25 years old.
You got 400 a night for the 2 nights, right?
300.
300. Okay.
300 each night, so $600 total. I should have gone to David when that second pressing came out, and I should have called up. I was young and naive. I'll take 50% of the responsibility.
Yeah.
I should have called and said, "Hey," but I didn't even know or care when it came out the first time.
Greg, when you got the call, did you know it was for a Dylan session?
No, can you do a session Friday night? Sure,
And was that Kevin called or Chris?
Kevin.
Okay.
How common was it for you to get a call for a session?
Not as common as it became. It became more common when I started doing more commercial work. But every once in a while, somebody would have me play on something of theirs.
Was it, you mentioned commercial work, but when you would get a call at that point, would it most often be somebody else's album or single or something like that?
Or demo.
Demo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I ever told you. I was starting to tell you my conspiracy theory on
Oh, right.
on why we never got credited.
I'd love to hear it.
I believe that since it was unaccredited, we did not sign W-2s, we did not sign releases that came out on the album, and the legal department at Columbia they went nuts. What do you mean? What do you mean they didn't sign releases? I could have sued them. So I think what they did was they said, okay, listen. These guys, they're not like, it's not like we're working with New York cats.
Right, they're good Minnesota boys.
These are Minnesota kids. Let's just take everybody's name off and see what happens. See if anybody complains. And nobody did, because I was young and naive.
Right.
Yeah.
But you got pissed off later on about it, didn't you?
No, I got, like I said, I don't think I've ever been pissed off, other than I felt pragmatically we were wronged. What they did was wrong. Because John Farrar told us with Olivia, he said, when you have a hit, everybody they want to use the same studio, the same instruments, the same musicians, the same producer, the same engineer. What kind of drugs were they doing?
Right.
Was it Peruvian or Colombian cocaine? What kind of booze they were smoking? They want to recreate the magic.
Right.
And we never got a chance to do that. The chances are better than 50-50 that some artist who was either about to record an album or had just recorded an album and was going to go on the road and put a band together. Hey, why don't we get those guys that did the Minneapolis guys that did the Dylan session?
Right.
Why don't we see if we can get that whole band? It could have happened, but am I bitter about it? No. Same way I'm not bitter about the fact that when we quit Olivia, Bernie Pershey said, either we quit Olivia in 2 weeks or I'm leaving the band. And so we quit Olivia in 2 weeks, and a month later he left the band. What the hell?
Freaking drummers. Had you played in Sound 80 before, or was it the first time?
No, I'd played in Sound 80 before. I broke.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
I broke Herb Pilhofer's brand new Bosendorfer.
Oh, nice. That's really nice of you.
But he was thankful.
Why's that?
We're playing along, and I'm pounding rock and roll for David Peroni's demo, right? And we're hearing this rattle. Finally, Meat Martinson comes out, and he looks in there, and one of the bridge saddles on one of the strings had popped. And it was new. $90,000 piano.
Right.
It was a bad weld. And if I wasn't pounding on it, if somebody was just tinkling on it, that might not have happened for years, and they might have said, oh, warranty's over, bye.
Right.
Get it fixed yourself. So I did him a favor.
Love Herb. Now, so
You should try out everybody's new piano.
Yeah, I do.
where were you playing around, let's say, do you remember where your gigs were that week, or were you working at the time?
God. Well, no, we were on the road with Olivia.
Okay.
And off the road with Olivia, so I wasn't.
So you were off the road and weren't gigging
we weren't
that.
gigging that night. I had no gigs that weekend.
What part of Minneapolis were you living in then?
We were living in Egan.
Oh, you were still with the band.
We were with the farm.
Wow.
We were on the farm when the Dylan stuff happened.
So who was living with you then in the Egan?
Bernie Pershey, Dale Strength, Bob Strength, Robin Lee. I think Bob Vandell might have been living there too.
And these were all the musicians who were going out with Olivia too?
No,
Oh,
Bob Vandell didn't, and Bob Strength didn't. He did on the first tour because Bernie had left This Oneness, and we started a AOR kind of club band, doing album cuts, Messina and Loggins and Messina and stuff like that. We were called, what were we called? Silver Moon. And it was me, Dale, Robin, Doug, and Bob Strength, Doug Nelson,
Sure.
and Bob Strength. It was at that time that we got the gig with Olivia, when we were Silver Moon. And so Bob went out on the first couple of tours, not Bernie. And Bob has got the low voice. And Bob did all the, oh, let me be there. And he did it great. Then Bernie came back to join the band, and we took him out. And I've regretted that ever since.
Why's that?
Because he hated the gig. He would love it now, but he
Yeah.
he hated the gig, and Bob loved the gig. Bob was really good he did the vocal thing, and we should have kept Bob, and then just said, okay, Bernie, we'll be home, and then we'll go out and play. You can be at the farm here and take care of the
Right.
farm and go do gigs, have fun.
Feed the cows.
Yeah, whatever. But unfortunately, didn't work that way.
So that first night, you show up at Sound 80.
Yeah.
What time of the evening was it? Who was there? Were they working yet? Or was everybody
It's
just
evening, it's
milling
like
around?
6:37,
cold night.
cold night, freezing cold. Yep. It's dark out. Dylan has a cold.
So who's the
Keeps to
first
himself.
person you see when you walk in the studio?
God, I heard I had a good time in the 70s, and I heard the 80s weren't bad either, Paul. Jeez. Who's the first person I saw?
How long did it take before
Buddha. I don't know who the
who's-
first person I
who's-
saw was.
Who's the? So how long were you there before they said, "Let's start to play"? I mean, you had a hang for
Well,
a while,
like
right?
I walk in and Kevin, I see Kevin and stuff, and then they're telling me who it is, and Bob's over there somewhere, Yeah,
Was Chris already there, kind of huddled with him with the guitar, or?
You know what? No, never mind. Don't disrespect the dead. No, I don't know.
If there are inaccuracies that you'd like to correct.
Oh, no, I'm not going to refute somebody else's memory of it, because who's to say mine's right?
Okay, that's fair.
Well, let's say yours is right for this interview. So when?
All I know is that Chris never taught me any songs.
Right. Okay.
He
Got it.
never came
Sure.
off as the musical director to me.
Okay.
The one song Dylan wrote the chords on the margin of a newspaper for Tangled Up in Blue, ripped it off and threw it on the other and said, here's the chords of the next song. Okay. And that's what Kevin, after we ran it, Kevin said, well, what do you think? Passable. What do you mean? He said, well, G is a folk key, and if you were to raise it up to A, you'd be pushing your vocal a little more, and that's more of a rock key. I think it would have more energy. So he said, okay. So I wrote the new chords next to Dylan's chords, and we did it. One take.
Now,
I know what Kevin said about the moment after he said passable, and then Dylan said, what do you mean by that? How did you feel at that moment? Did you think that Kevin had stepped over?
Wasn't even concerned.
Okay.
I was just there. People tell me I came off as bitter in Kevin's book. I wasn't bitter. I was young and naive. Just because I wasn't into 3-chord music doesn't mean that I didn't try my best to play it as well as I could. I was not cavalier. I wasn't egotistical about it. I wasn't going, Yeah, I can play 3 chords. No, it was like, okay, I was serious. It was Dylan. We'd been meeting people for the last almost 2 years. You know, we'd been opening for the Smothers Brothers and Norm Crosby and
Don Rickles.
Don Rickles.
Do you have a Norm or a Don impersonation?
You know, Norm used to come to our room
Okay.
after the gig because he liked to get high.
Right. Oh, nice.
And so he'd come and he'd do another 30-minute set
Right.
of trying out his new material.
Right.
Yeah, the king threw Daniel in the dang den, you know. He'd come and do new material while he was smoking with us. It was great.
So,
But I mean, as far as being, I wasn't starstruck.
yeah.
And the fact that I didn't believe that he walked on water, even though I had respect for him, for
Right.
his legacy, for his lyrics. Like I say, I like the Byrds version of, you know,
Mr. Tambourine Man.
Mr. Tambourine Man more than I like Dylan's. And that's why those guys like the diehard aficionados that, you know, they think that because that more depressing versions, acoustic versions, they were depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And those more depressing versions that's the real Dylan to
Yeah.
them. It's like, well, who the hell, that's not even the real Dylan to Dylan anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
You know what I mean? The real Dylan to Dylan isn't last week.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm seeing now. It's like, he wouldn't even agree with them.
Now, when you got done, did you have any idea how many verses were in Tangled Up in Blue, or did you just kind of count it off and start playing until Bob was done singing?
Well, he wrote out the chords for the verse and the you know, from the beginning to the end of the section.
But you didn't know how many verses were there. You
And
just
I
kept.
just kept going, and
Yeah.
then he played harmonica on one, and we do,
Right.
you know.
Oh, you must have known then that the harmonica break at the end was going to bring the song to an end. He must have said
Well, yeah,
something.
I assumed it by then.
Right.
Nobody told us. I don't think.
Because for a
maybe they did.
For a one-take song, you do all end up perfectly. I mean,
Yeah.
it really does come to a
Oh yeah.
perfect end.
Have you played much with Billy Peterson and Bill Berg before?
No, Billy was in Natural Life.
Right.
And they were the other fusion band in town. This Oneness and Natural Life. We would alternate Sundays at the Longhorn. We'd have one, they'd have one, we'd have one, they'd have one. They were the jazz cats approaching fusion from the jazz side. We were the rock cats approaching fusion
Right.
from the rock side. Now, I've always said I enjoyed Bill Connors in Return to Forever, the first guitar player, more than I did Al Di Meola, because Bill Connors was more of a rock player reaching for the jazz and reaching for the fusion, and Al Di Meola was the, oh, here, how about this? He was arrogant,
Right.
and Bill Connors was more real to
Right.
me, just to me.
So did you get a chance to hear those guys? Were you working or on the
Oh,
road?
no, we would hear them
Yeah.
whenever we could. They were, you know, Bill Berg, like I say, Bill Berg he was, you know,
Right.
as a drummer, I'm looking at Bill going, and he taught me one of my biggest lessons
Which
that
was?
I've mentioned before. When we were listening to the playback of Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts, and I'm sitting in the corner of the control room, and Dylan and Bill Berg are over by the speakers, and Bill's going, okay, well, I played it like this, but I could do it, and what I'm seeing is a giant reservoir of talent, and it all comes down to a little spigot, and I'm seeing Bill Berg hand that spigot to Dylan and say, here, turn on as much as you want,
Right.
or as little as you want. And that lesson, to me, has stuck with me my whole life. Every session I've done, I would rather have people say, that's a really great session, that's a really great commercial, rather than, boy, that sucks, but listen to that keyboard player. Man.
Right.
Ooh.
Could you feel like when you hit that last chord on Tangled Up in Blue, did you guys all kind of feel like, oh yeah, we got, not necessarily that there wouldn't be another take, but yeah, that was really freaking good.
I didn't. You know, they said, that's good. I was like, okay, good.
What do you remember about working with Paul Martinson?
Oh, I did a bunch of work with Paul. Different
Now, I
things.
heard it, I was talking to Steve Weiss a couple weeks ago, and then we called Scott Rivard, and we were on this conversation, and he said Paul had kind of a weird gait. He had one leg shorter than the other one. Tell us about that, because I talked to Paul on the phone, but I'd never met him in person.
His pants were always halfway down his ass. He had he had no ass.
Right.
Nothing.
One of those guys.
Yeah, but he was, we used to call him Shaker Thompson. Me and David Peroni was a guy who worked in some bands around town, and he got a backer to back him to make a demo. And he called me in to help him produce it and play keyboards and stuff. So we're doing this thing. That's where I broke the Bosendorfer on those sessions. And while we're doing these sessions, Martinson's the engineer, and David is just, wild turkey. Both of us, wild turkey, yeah. And Paul's, we rode him pretty hard. The manager guy, the backer, shows up one night about 1 o'clock in the studio with Daryl Hall and John Oates. Somehow he hired them to come sing on a song, right? Poor Girl, Poor Me. So we're in the studio, me, David, Daryl, and John. And we're running the song, right? Chorus after chorus. And Daryl says to David, he says, what we usually do is we usually get one chorus and get it really good, and then we just insert it into all the choruses. And David looks at him and says, oh yeah? Well, we don't do it that way. And he made him sing chorus after chorus. And I'm sure they're both thinking, what the heck did we get ourselves into?
Well, he must have paid him a lot.
I don't know. I never heard what they got paid, but I've got a recording of it. It's, poor girl, poor me, poor girl. This is great. We had a band called This Oneness, and that was the band that backed Olivia Newton John. It was a fusion band. We had an organ player, Robin Lee, in the first version of This Oneness. And he got a call one day from Variety Artists, and they wanted to know if he was interested in playing organ for this Australian girl that they were rehearsing with in town. He said, no, I've got a band, I'm good. A couple more weeks went by. They called him back. He said no. And they called back again a third time. And I guess that's when they asked him if he and maybe some of your band members could do it. So he said, well, I'll bring my guitar player down. So Dale and Robin went down. And Dale's standing outside, and he's got cowboy boots on. And Olivia comes outside, and she says, oh, you've got cowboy boots. He says, yeah. Do you play country music? He said, well, yeah, my dad was a country musician. Oh, do you think you could play it better than those fellows? And what they had done was they got the best jazz session guys they could find in town, and they couldn't play country rock. They didn't know how. So Dale says, yeah, we could do it better. They fired the band. This is the day before the first gig. They fired the band. We went and we got, that was in the morning. We went and we got her first album. We listened to it once. We went to rehearsal at 4 o'clock, and we rehearsed for about 6 hours down at Moon Studio with Olivia, and her producer was the main guitar, John Farrar.
Okay.
And Dale was the second guitar. And
is she doing Let Me Be there? Is that would be kind
that's
of that
the
era?
first one.
Okay.
Yeah, and stuff like John Denver, what's that one?
Fly Away.
Country Home,
Country
Country
Roads, yeah.
Stuff like that.
If Not For You. Did she do
If
that on
Not
the
For
first
You, I think, yeah, she did that. But it was more country stuff than physical, I think, is when she started going more poppy.
Right.
But anyway, we go in, and we rehearse with them. They've got charts, and they're easy charts. I mean, like I say, we're doing fusion music at the time, so it's like, yeah, I can do country roads.
Yeah.
Country road. And we go home, we pack our bags, and we get our gear ready. And a Greyhound bus shows up the next morning. We do vocal rehearsal on the bus on the way. We play Brookings, South Dakota, University in Brookings. She gets a standing ovation, and everybody relaxes, her management and stuff. And we were with her for almost 2 years. We got turned on to, in that first tour, we got turned on to Monty Python before it came here, because they had audio cassettes. And they would play them in the bus.
Right.
So we'd be listening to this stuff and just laughing our tails off.
Passing joints with Olivia?
No, but later on, when
I do give Olivia credit for Have You Never Been Mellow? I remember that was one of her big radio hits too, and it was so funny because when you did get high back then, you were like, oh man, I'm so mellow.
Do you know
that word hit the radio and it was like,
we did that.
I figured you did.
We did that. And John Farrar has given us, he gave us credit. Robin Lee was, he drank a lot of coffee and he was a hyper guy. And he'd be, and we'd go, Robin, would you just mellow out? Just sit down, mellow out. And John one night came up, he said, chaps, he said, what is this mellow out you keep saying to Robin? What does that mean? I don't know, sit down, take your shoes off, relax.
Chill in today's parlance.
And we told him what it meant. He goes home and writes a $1 million hit song. What the hell? Why couldn't we do that? But had Dale, she said, I asked Dale, well, how about if you want to come out and be my musical director? He said, no. How about you and Greg? You could be co-musical directors. And we turned her down. Had we have gone, I'd probably be dead, because we'd go out there and we wouldn't be like new, unknown musicians in the LA scene. And not that we'd be up here, but we'd be hanging with some people.
Right.
And freebase was really big at the time.
Yeah, that would have killed you.
I'd be dead.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
So I'm all roads lead to now.
Rick, one of the things that's I've known Greg for probably 30 years. We've played together, we've hung out, I've booked him for shows, and but as you can see with this last hour and a half, he's an incredible storyteller.
Absolutely.
And a bit of an impressionist.
Yes, he is.
And we can't leave today till we hear a little Columbo.
You know what? I got a gig one time. I did some gigs for General Mills. And one time, this woman calls me and she says, hi, I'm doing a going away party, a retirement party for a guy, and he was the head of Yoplait Columbo yogurt in our division. So I got the trench coat on, I got the rumpled gray suit, I got the tie, I got the messed up hair. And I'm basically walking around this party talking to people. Well, I tell you what. My wife was telling me the other night, she said, what about the gas can? How did the gas can get from the patio to the porch? And I started thinking about it. It's probably nothing. I shouldn't probably bother you with this. And so I talked to people, and finally we went downstairs, and then I come down there and I play my few songs. They all laugh, and I leave.
Anyway, this is Paul Metsa with the Wall of Power TV with my guests Gregg Inhofer and Rick Shefchik. My good buddy who haven't seen this, our first COVID show, the great Andy Watson behind the scenes. So stay tuned. We'll be around this week, same time, same station. We'll save you a seat.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, that was great.
Works for me.
me.